Welcome, everybody, back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today, we are giving you sickos some NBA content. We've been doing our NFL season preview stuff. You can go back and check that out. We're already through 2 divisions. We ranked our top 10 quarterbacks. But today, we are going to be doing a little bit of NBA offseason talk. We are going to be ranking the top 10 defenders in the NBA today, Logan. As always, we think of a list idea, think, oh, that's going to be so much fun. It ends up being agonizing. So, with that in mind, who were your toughest cuts from this list?
I mean, I kind of just want to shout out every perimeter defender-oriented guy in the league. There's a lot of guys that I had to omit from this list just because of defensive impact in general. I just think the guys that can protect the rim, that can end possessions with rebounds, guys with that kind of skill set, I think, are a little more valuable. That being said, I omitted a former defensive player of the year, a guy that I think is going to be a lot better this next year, moving back to the 4 spot. So I think my toughest cut was probably Jaren Jackson Jr. We've seen how impactful he can be at his apex when he's playing that rover role at the 4 spot alongside another big man. And I think he's going to be a lot better next year. So with his combination of rim protection and just defensive playmaking, he was probably my toughest cut. But like I said, man, a handful of perimeter defenders: Herb Jones, Jaden McDaniels, Alex Caruso, Jalen Suggs.
Wow, none of them on your list.
Lou Dort, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Matisse Thybulle. Yeah, I just think there are guys that can have a more pronounced impact because of their ability to defend on the perimeter and on the interior. So unfortunately, I got to leave those guys off my list.
JJJ was honestly not that tough of a cut for me just because of how bad he was this past year, how glaring his limitations as a rebounder and just as your defensive center were. So I'm not losing a bunch of sleep over having him off my list. However, I do want to shout out some of the same guys who you did. A lot of my toughest cuts are those elite perimeter defenders because, like you, I believe that rim protectors, bigs defensively are the most valuable players, and it is mostly guys in that archetype on my list, with a few exceptions, but had to leave off Drew Holiday, had to leave off Derek White, had to leave off Suggs, had to leave off Jaden McDaniels, and then the couple bigs I want to shout out who I did leave off my list: Jared Allen, Joel Embiid, and I'll give a bit of a shout to Kristaps Porzingis just because of his elite pure rim protection, but he has clear limitations in space. Same goes for Embiid. That's why he's not on my list. Honestly, we could shout out damn near the entire Boston Celtics team defense. I think Tatum, for his versatility, is a tough cut. But the guys on my list are all really, really exceptional at their role and are generally also very complete defenders. So, with that being said, my 10 spot was absolutely agonizing. My toughest cut I haven't even mentioned yet because I want to give him a whole spiel when I talk about the guy who I do have in my 10 spot because it just breaks my heart. I think there's 11 top 10 defenders in the NBA. And you know me, Logan. I want to include everybody. One very, very deserving guy is cut. I'll get to him in a minute. Who do you have in your 10 spot, though, Logan?
In my 10 spot, I'd still hear an argument, despite this guy getting up there in age, I'd probably hear an argument for top 5 if you really wanted to make the case. In my 10 spot, I have Draymond Green.
Wow.
And the reason that he's not higher on my list is just because of how he's fallen a little bit in terms of like real rim protection. He wasn't as impactful as he was 2 years ago at defending the rim, but this is one of the smartest guys in basketball history. Just when you watch him on tape, the positioning, knowing where to be at all times, rotating within the flow of the defense and pre-rotating. Like, Draymond might be the smartest defender I've ever watched. The guy just knows where to be. He knows where the ball's going. He knows every guy on the court's weakness and how he should play against them to dictate and to push them where he wants them to go. Like, Draymond just controls that side of the ball in a way that very few players in the league can. His defensive IQ is just off the charts. He's still a good help side rim protector. Again, he's not as impactful as he was a couple of years back, which is why he can't be higher. Super strong, still a great post defender, still great defending the pick and roll. And you see it in the advanced numbers. The Warriors have a defensive rating 5.9 points per 100 possessions better with Dre on the floor versus off. A defensive rating of 112 with Dre. A defensive rating without him of 117.9. Like I said, though, getting up there a little bit in age, losing some athleticism, and a little bit less impactful as a rim protector. So that's why he's down at 10 for me. But like I said, dude, Dre's impact, I think it's also hard. I don't think, for Steph and Dre both, man, it's kind of hard to look at their individual impacts because I don't think they have great supporting cast around them for both sides of the ball. Steph doesn't have a whole lot of offensive creators around him. Dre doesn't have a whole lot of defensive minded players around him in Golden State. So, like I said, I'd hear an argument for him higher on this list, but he's going to fall in my 10 spot.
This is a little low for with Dre, and part of that is just that I don't want to overreact to the fact that this was a bit of a down season, because in 2023, I thought he was basically inarguably one of the 2 best defenders on the planet. He was my depoy in the regular season, which was not a common pick, but he was so transformative for that Warriors defense and was elite as a rim protector. Was not at his defensive peak, but was still up there with AD that season as the 2 best defenders on the planet. And he did take a step back as a rim protector this past year. As you mentioned, normally we see him hold players like 9 to 13% below their typical field goal percentage at the rim, which is insane for a 6'5 player, but he is just that sort of absolute freak. This past year, it was just 2% below average, which is a very mediocre, forgettable number. And we have seen some athletic regression. He's 34 years old. He's not quite as quick. He's not quite as athletic as he used to be. But again, we're just 1 year removed from a dominant regular season, a dominant postseason, and I still think he's the smartest and the most versatile defensive player on the planet. He's still, as you mentioned, had a huge impact in terms of improving the Warriors' defense when he was on the court. He's still an 83rd percentile post defender. His ability to irritate the league's premier post players, to use his strength to bump them off their spots, to use his hands to make plays on the ball. He's still one of the best in the league there. He is still a very, very high-level perimeter defender as well. And his greatest asset is his team defense. The fact that his motor doesn't stop. He always knows where to be. Like, he has a supernatural basketball IQ. His anticipation, his understanding of the opposing team's actions, what they want to get into, his ability to blow up plays in that way. It's still at the absolute apex of the league. And his physicality, his strength is still extremely effective. So, to me, it's just that bit of athletic drop-off takes him just out of my top 5, but he is so established, still does so many things at such a high level that I can't have him all the way down at 10, because the guy who I do have down at 10 doesn't impact the game in terms of the rim protection that Draymond does still bring. He's not that versatile. At number 10, I have the best defensive guard in basketball. So I have one guard on my list. That is Alex Caruso. But the dude who I want to give a big shout out to, the dude who I can already see people quote tweeting this graphic and being outraged about his omission, is Herb Jones. Because I think that Herb Jones is purely the best one-on-one perimeter defender that we have in basketball today. And it breaks my heart to leave him off this list. 6'7", with a 7-foot-plus wingspan. His pure on-ball defense and his matchup versatility is insane. With all of that length, with that size, he navigates screens like he was Flat Stanley, man. He just teleports through screens and is constantly able to affect guys with back pressure, with his length. He recovers so quickly. And if you were just to say, okay, I need you to throw somebody out there to get a stop on SGA, to get a stop on De'Aaron Fox, to get a stop on Steph Curry, basically any of the league's premier guards, Herb would be my guy. I mean, what we saw him do against SGA, and it's not a big sample size, but SGA shot 3 of 11 when guarded by Herb Jones in that first round series, and he had him in hell, man. His ability to decelerate with SGA and then to recover to affect every mid-range jumper with that insane length of his, like, it is special. I do think there are some very big forwards who can go through Herb just because he's not the thickest, strongest guy, like LeBron is a problematic matchup. But there's really no perfect perimeter defender in basketball today. Jaden McDaniels suffers from that same issue, just more so because he's like 20, 25 pounds lighter than Herb and not quite as big. So yes, if I just want like that elite perimeter stopper one-on-one, Herb is my choice. The reason that I'm going Caruso is because I do think he's a better team defender. He has amazing instincts. He's an amazing shot blocking guard, and you see that with review contests, recovery blocks on drives. You also see it with his ability to act as the low man. Like, his rim protection for a guard is special, averaging a block a game, holding opposing players as a guard 5% below their average field goal percentage at the rim. Like, Herb doesn't have that sort of impact as a team defender. Caruso gave you 2.7 stocks per game this year. His instincts jumping passing lanes, swiping at the ball, both on and off ball. Like, he just generates so many swing plays because he's such a freak athlete and his instincts are so good. And he's still an amazing on-ball defender. 83rd percentile isolation defender, 77th percentile post defender. It is really exceptional how difficult it is to try to attack Caruso. He's not small, right? He's a 6'5" athletic guard with some pretty solid length. But still, when we look at the elite defenders, they are big wings and they are bigs. But Caruso is so strong. His hands are so good that he holds up really against pretty much anybody. And I think his motor is even more nonstop than Herb's. Herb is a better on-ball defender. Herb is more versatile in terms of the primary matchups he can take on. I say that Caruso can hold up against pretty much anybody. You're not going to put him on a big wing. My point is, if that guy tried to attack him out of the post in one possession, I would be fine with Caruso living in that matchup. I would trust him to hold up in those sort of short stints. And I think that complete defensive profile, how exceptionally complete he is for a defensive guard, is why every year you look at the impact. He improves your team defense by 7-8 points per 100 possessions. He has, in every season of his career, posted at least an 80th percentile defensive on-off number. In 4 of the 7 years, at least 90th percentile. And that is almost unprecedented for a guard. The dudes who we see have that sort of monstrous impact on team defense year after year after year are the bigs. You don't normally replicate that sort of impact year after year as a guard, and I think the team defense aspect is a huge part of it for Caruso. So it broke my heart, man. I went down to the wire because I think Herb probably has more potential to have like that sort of signature moment in a playoff series, right? Where it's like you put him on the opposing team's star wing and he gives that guy hell. Caruso can't do that at the same level, but he's still damn good in that role, and he's a more complete defensive player.
Man, I respect you for sticking to your guns here. I couldn't have a guard or any of these smaller wings just because of the physical limitations that you mentioned, but I think this is a good take. I know. Why do you think Herb is second to you in those smaller guys? Like, you think there's a gap between, like, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jalen Suggs?
Not a big gap. Not a big gap at all, but I just think Herb is the best on-ball defender of the bunch. I think Derek White and Drew Holiday are both exceptional, but I think if I were going to go with like the complete defensive guard route, I would say that Caruso is the best in that mold currently. He's the most athletic. I think he's the most dynamic, the most destructive to a game. He has the highest motor of all those guys. So it kind of came down to, do I want the best team defender or do I want the best one-on-one defender? And I went with the best team defender.
I'm intrigued, man. I'm really intrigued.
I'm wondering. I know there's going to be some big who you have on your list who I maybe didn't consider as much. I can just feel that. I can feel it in my heart. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe. Yeah, we are going to get a switch here. I already know that this guy isn't on your list. And my 9 spot is Jayson Tatum. And Tatum's unique in the sense that the Celtics are actually 1 point per 100 possessions worse with Tatum on the floor defensively. They have a defensive rating of 112.2
Those numbers are all
with
fake
Tatum.
for the Celtics. The
Exactly.
Celtics have too many great defenders.
They just have
It's
a
fake.
surplus because
Too
they
much
have
noise.
100%. I completely agree. He's one of the best defenders defending the pick and roll in all of basketball. He's an elite isolation defender. And I think he's the best wing defender in basketball, all things included. His defensive discipline, Tatum is so great at not biting on fakes, at keeping guys on the perimeter, not letting guys blow by him. But when those guys do blow by him, too, I think he's great at staying engaged and making plays in recovery, too. I think he's a great defender on ball and off ball. I also love Tatum's aggressiveness, too, his defensive playmaking. He tends to gamble a little bit, but I think it works out. He can do that a little more here in Boston, too. I want to emphasize that just because of the great team defense around him. You've got Jaylen Brown. You've got Drew Holiday. You've got Derek White. You've got Kristaps Porzingis. Everybody can defend here. But specifically when we're talking about those guys, Tatum can legitimately defend 1 through 5. I really value that, his versatility. And I really value his rebounding value, the way that Tatum can end possessions. That's a rare skill that even some of the bigs on my list can't. Like, Tatum is a legitimately great rebounder, 7.2 defensive rebounds per game. Yeah, I think Tatum's the best wing defender on the planet. And
wow.
There's a little bit of an athletic gap, I think, between him and Draymond. That's why I would have him there. I think Draymond's probably the smarter defensive player. Again, I think I value Tatum a little bit more because of his athletic traits at this point in his career, and that's why I went with him above Dre. at their stage. Obviously, I think Dre's an all-timer in that regard. But, yeah, man, it surprised me a little bit that you don't have Tatum on this list. And it was kind of hard because, again, you have that dynamic of, should I have a big here that can really protect the rim at a high level? Would I rather have that guy in a vacuum over a guy like Tatum? But because of Tatum's versatility, because of his ability to rebound the hell out of the basketball, and because of his defensive playmaking, I've got him on my list, man. And I'm happy with that. He is the highest wing defender on my list. Everybody above him they're all bigs. They are all bigs above him on my list.
I'm surprised that you're mentioning defensive playmaking for Tatum because I don't consider that to be a real strength of his, generating like those big swing plays. I don't think that he has exceptional instincts in terms of targeting the ball, making strips, right, jumping passing lanes. I also don't think that he brings nearly the sort of rim protection, even secondary rim protection, that you would want from a bigger wing who's going to be on this list.
He is by far the least impactful rim protector on my list. That's not even close. It's everything else that Tatum does.
And versatility is the name of the game for him, absolutely. The ability to switch 1 through 5, which he actually did. Okay, we actually just saw that in a playoff series. Now, do I want him guarding an elite center? No, but if you are talking about an average center, he can hold up physically, athletically. He can hold up on the glass. He is an elite rebounder. And there's nobody who you are going to put him on in terms of perimeter players and say, like, that's a glaring mismatch. We don't want Tatum on that guy whatsoever. The thing is, Tatum doesn't necessarily have that elite trait defensively. I mean, his versatility is really impressive, but again, the rim protection is not there. As a pure perimeter defender, he's good. He's not elite, right? Like, you get tremendous value out of his ability to survive, to guard Luka, and to hang with a Gafford or with a Lively on the interior on the glass. But like, Luka was able to find success in that matchup. Luka shot 12 of 21 against Jayson Tatum. He is not nearly on the level of a Herb Jones, right? Of a couple of other wing defenders, in my opinion, in terms of stay in front of your man, present problems, nor is he that level of off-ball defender. So for Tatum, it really just comes down to switchability, and it comes down to rebounding. And he's very good at those things. Again, I just don't think he is at the elite level as an on or off ball defender to be destructive in the way that some of these other guys are. So he's a solid honorable mention, but I think there's a couple wing defenders who are better on ball defenders, more athletic freaks, and also are more destructive off ball defenders.
I think Tatum's an elite off ball defender. I don't know, man. Tatum blew up a lot of shit in the playoffs. Like, Tatum blew up a lot of shit in the playoffs.
I don't consider Tatum an elite off ball defender.
That's interesting. We're just gonna have to agree to disagree here, man. I don't know. I'm kind of surprised. So you would list those guys off for me, man, if you can. Like, who do you think is just concretely a better wing defender than Tatum overall? Obviously, Caruso. You would have Herb Jones.
Caruso's in a bit of a different archetype. Yeah, I think that Herb is a better defender. Again, it's like Herb can just destroy an individual matchup. And Tatum's versatility is super valuable, but I'll give you the guys who I have concretely above him right now because I have 2 wings in my 9 and 8 spot. I have OG Anunoby in my 9 spot.
Interesting.
You have Tatum over OG.
I do. OG's a tough cut. OG's really, really strong. He blows shit up too. He's probably a better defensive playmaker, but yeah, that versatility and rebounding I just really value with Tatum, man. But OG's a great pick. I don't mind this. There's
definitely a rebounding gap. I just think OG is better in basically every other way. I do think that he's a more versatile defender. I think that you see that with like the true matchup difficulty. I thought that Sixers series was a huge testament to how special OG is as a defensive player. That you can put him on Tyrese Maxey, and shout out Deuce McBride, he guarded him very well too, but OG is arguably the best answer for Maxey with his screen navigation, with his length, with his size, and he's also a legit Embiid defender, right? Like, you have to send some help in that matchup, but Maxey went 6 of 16 when guarded by OG. Embiid went 7 of 21. Like, that is crazy defensive versatility, and he was transformative for the Knicks this year. They had a defensive rating of 101.8 with him on the floor, 16.4 points per 100 possessions better than when he was off the floor. Nobody else is going to touch that number. That's like a half-season sample size, but it's absolutely absurd. He's 6'7", 232 with a 7'2 wingspan. He's got elite size, strength, and length for a wing, and he moves really, really well for being that size, for having the strength in his frame that he does. And his motor doesn't stop either, right? Like, he is able to deny the ball with such intensity. His screen navigation is impressive for his size. That's an advantage that I would give to OG over Tatum, that I would give to Caruso over Tatum, that I would give to Herb Jones over Tatum. Their sheer motor and tenacity on the defensive end. Tatum does his job well, but he also has an offensive load. These guys are just focused on, how do I destroy the game for the opposition defensively? I would give an edge to all those guys who I just mentioned, and really everybody who I have on my list over Tatum in that way. I do think he's a better defensive playmaker, as you mentioned. Got great hands, great instincts to go with his length. Still, though, the limitations for OG, the reason I don't have him higher, as incredible as he is as a wing forward defender, is that the guys above him are generally more monstrously impactful team defenders. They provide rim protection at a much higher level. I do think that OG is a better low man, a better help defender, a better secondary rim protector than Tatum, but it's not where he excels. He just doesn't anchor a defense on the interior like the guys above him, and that's the most valuable thing you can do. The other issue with OG is that he's not a very good rebounder. 4.2 rebounds per game this regular season is below average even for his position. So he is an amazing, amazing defensive wing. I do think the elite bigs just have more impact. Tatum over Draymond, though, I will say, I disagree with. I think, again, the psychotic motor aspect, I think Draymond's IQ is higher. I think Draymond is a significantly better rim protector. I think his matchup versatility is right there with Tatum's, but he's a better post defender. I think he's probably a better pure perimeter defender. That one really surprises me. And I'm a huge proponent of giving Tatum credit for the value of his sheer versatility in the finals, especially. I thought that it changed that series, but that's really what he has going for him. It's just versatility, being able to guard 1 through 5 well, but not necessarily at an elite level, and then being an awesome defensive rebounder, especially for his position.
Yeah, I think there's an athletic gap, and I think there's a rebounding gap there. And I will say, I think Anunoby's rebounding numbers also suffer too. I mean, he plays in just a jumbo-sized defense. Also, he's a lot of the time drawing the matchup that's taking the shot. So I think I'm not saying he's a good, a great rebounder or anything.
It's never been a strength of his, though. All the years in Toronto, he hovers around like 5 boards a game.
Yeah, as I mentioned, everybody above him on this list is an impactful rim protector, and that's kind of where all of this guy's value comes from. And at number 8, I have Chet Holmgren. I'm intrigued to see if he's even on your list here. 2.3 blocks per game this regular season. That was tied 4th in all of the league. And he does have his drawbacks, right? Strength, size, and rebounding. Those are the areas where Chet's a little deficient against these really stronger centers. Basically anybody in the league, right? Not that they're going to baby Chet, but they just have way more control in the post and on the low block. They can sun Chet a little bit in that respect. I'll give him his credit. He's feisty. Chet battles defensively, but again, there's only so much you can make up for when there's a strength and size gap like that. But Chet has elite positioning. He has elite instincts, and he is so great at staying vertical, man. Chet is so good at not fouling guys when they drive the lane. He's really fluid. I think that's a huge advantage to Chet, too. Moving and defending on the perimeter and in the pick and roll, I think he's elite there. And I think he's only going to get better, again, with just more experience in the league. And as his frame fills out, I think he can climb up this list. I think he's going to be probably battling with Mobley and Wemby for like the league's best defender in the league in a few years, and he'll probably never be the league's best defender just because I think Wemby is obviously coming for that crown. Yeah. But opponents shot 11.4% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That was the 5th best mark in all of basketball. Minimum 6 defensive field goal attempts per game. Decent post defender, decent isolation defender, solid roll man defender. But again, most of his limitations come from just the lack of size and the lack of strength. But I think Chet's going to get a lot better there. And I think he's a little bit better defending on the perimeter and in space because of his fluidity and because of his agility. So I would hear an argument for some guys above him on this list, specifically like a Rudy Gobert or somebody like that. But I also think that's probably an over-criticized part of Gobert's game just because of all the highlight clips that we had. So I can hear an argument for Chet being higher on this list, but he's going to fall in that 8 spot for me. It's mostly just because of those size and strength limitations and the rebounding aspect.
I have Chet 1 spot higher than this at number 7. And when you talk about this incredible race that we're going to have for the best defender on the planet, and by the way, I loved all of those prospects you mentioned. Mobley was my favorite guy in 2021. Chet was my favorite guy in 2022. And shocker, Wemby was my favorite guy in 2023, of course. But, like, not just that. I called Chet the best prospect since Anthony Davis. I thought that Mobley was a generational defensive talent. And I probably shouldn't say that because then the next two guys have probably surpassed him as defensive prospects. Wemby definitely did. But, like, these are three freaks defensively in 3 years in a row. And the fact that they are all on this list, spoiler, when they are all in their early 20s, that's crazy. Chet is, to me, the smartest of them all, though. So if there is a path to him being the best defender on the planet, it's probably just Wemby, like, never fully locks in. It's tough to envision because he has the greatest physical tools we've ever seen defensively. But if he just gets a little sloppy on that side of the ball, that's where I think Chet would have the path. I don't expect that to happen. I expect Wemby to only get better and better. But Chet's pure timing and verticality as a rim protector, to me, are already both the best of anybody in the league. You mentioned the insane rim protection numbers. In the regular season, he was one of, like, the 5 best guys. In the playoffs, held opposing players 15% below their typical field goal percentage at the rim, made the Thunder an impenetrable interior defense. You think about all the times that he is just meeting drivers, attacking downhill, trying to punch on him, and they are not able to because that timing and because that verticality is the best. His positioning, his anticipation, like, all that stuff is perfect, and he blends that with this ridiculous length. He's also so prone to contesting with 2 hands up, which is just phenomenal technique, right? Give yourself the best chance possible to get a hand on that ball. And he blocked 2.3 shots per game in 29 minutes per game. So he's unreal there, and he can legitimately guard in space. 60th percentile isolation defender, switchable. The only reasons that I don't have him higher is basically what you laid out there. He's a good, not great post defender. I think that people overplayed in a big way concerns about his slightness as a prospect because post defense isn't the biggest thing for a big defensively. It's much more important that you're an elite rim protector. But B, his length is so exceptional that, like, even if you bully him, right? Even if you overpower him, you have to create enough space to where he can't still affect your shot. It's the same thing with both he and Wemby. Yes, they are slight. They are also monstrous shot blockers with ridiculous length. So he's still a 58th percentile post defender. Like, he mostly held up there. It's a relative weakness to some of the other league's elite bigs, but it's not like a big red flag for me. More than that, the issue is the rebounding. 7.9 boards per game. OKC was a terrible rebounding team altogether. That doesn't just fall on Chet, but that's where he needs to improve the most. That's where you feel pressure to bring in an Isaiah Hartenstein, and it just makes you a little concerned about him anchoring an elite playoff defense. We've already seen him anchor a really good defense as a rookie, but it's like you have to end possessions. You have to be elite there. Chet is not yet at this stage, but a strength of his is he can dominate at the 4 and the 5. That's something that we see with Evan Mobley as well, right? It's something that made them both so crazy. They're elite rim protectors, and they're super agile and mobile in space. Chet's going to win Defensive Player of the Year awards. I fully believe that. I think he just has to grow into his frame a bit more, and he doesn't have the broadest shoulders, right? I don't think Chet is going to add 40, 50 pounds like we see some of these guys add, like a Giannis, like Davis. But he'll absolutely continue to add weight. He'll become more physically mature. I think he'll get better on the glass. When he does, he'll be an exceptionally complete defender. And again, I think he'll win Defensive Player of the Year awards. And I think he'll be an MVP caliber player because of how good he'll be offensively. So I have him at 7. In my 8th spot is my last wing. I don't really consider Draymond a wing. He's a true 4. We've seen him play the 5 in extended stretches. He's such a great rim protector. This guy's not really a wing either, I guess. I would say that he's a 4. He's a big forward, but not a true big. That is Jonathan Isaac, Logan, who I don't expect you to have on your list. Why is that? Is it just not enough minutes? Why didn't he make the cut for you?
Jonathan Isaac's number 6 on my list.
Oh my God! Look at me! I presume. This is what happens when you assume. I make an ass out of you and me. Okay, I love that. Let me give my spiel. I guess I'm trying to do the calculus on who's left off your list. Whatever, we'll figure that out later. Maybe we won't. That'll be exciting. Isaac is an absolute freak defensively. His per minute defensive impact is absurd. And that's why I think he does have to be on this list. And I'm glad that you have him here. 4.5 stocks per 36 minutes. It's ridiculous. At 6'10 with a 7'1 wingspan, you should not be able to move how Isaac does. He is so explosive, so quick, so agile, and it just makes him a defensive monster in every way possible. He's a 94th percentile isolation defender, dominant guarding wings in space, 96th percentile post defender. Bigs really struggle against him in those one-on-one matchups. He's also a legitimately good rim protector. He racks up block numbers. Some of those are recovery blocks. Some of those, though, are as the low man, where he's very good. Opposing players shot 6% below average at the rim against him in the regular season, and in the playoffs, more than 16% worse. That's a 7-game sample size. We shouldn't overreact to that, but it's just ridiculous. It's a testament to the massive value he has as an interior defender while also being this awesome defensive wing. And he's an elite rebounding wing. He gives you 10 rebounds per 36. His impact is also ridiculous. He improved this Magic defense that was already very good with him off the floor by 8 points per 100 possessions. So when he's on the floor, they have a defensive rating of 105.6. That is several points better than the best defense in the NBA. To be able to take a good defense and improve them by that much is insane, right? That's like the most valuable thing you can do as a defensive player. And he's basically elite at everything defensively for a forward. So it's just the true elite bigs and Draymond, who I think is just such an exceptional genius on that side of the ball, still who clear him to me. I do think that he is the best defensive forward in basketball outside of Draymond.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, Carson. You read off a lot of the advanced stats that I was going to mention. He's also an 88th percentile spot-up defender, a 72nd percentile defending off screens, an above-average defender in the pick and roll, and it really is that multifaceted impact. I mean, I trust Isaac on the perimeter. I really trust him on the interior, and he's one hell of a defensive playmaker. You mentioned it. If you extrapolate those per 36 numbers, he's averaging 1.7 steals per game, which would tie 6th in all of basketball, and he had 2.8 blocks per game per 36. That would rank 2nd in all of basketball. Also, defensive rebounds per game per 36, 7.4. I mean, all those numbers are phenomenal. Yeah. Again, he's doing this in 15 minutes per game, so I have him above Chet, and I'll spoil it. It was tough deciding between these two. I have him slightly above Evan Mobley, too. I just don't think Jonathan Isaac gets enough burn. I think if John Isaac got the kind of burn that these guys would, we would see this kind of pronounced impact, and I think he'd be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations. You mentioned the two biggest numbers, an elite isolation defender, an elite post defender. Yeah, I think John Isaac's probably the most underrated defender in all of basketball, man.
And we call him a forward, but we saw the Magic play him at small ball 5 in the playoffs. You can absolutely play him as your small ball 5.
I think it works. I think it may be the best route for him on the floor, right? Just in terms of you're not losing a ton of spacing, right? If you're going to have a non-floor spacer, it's best that he plays at the 5 spot. And Isaac actually showed us he's got a little bit of shooting touch. He can do it a little bit. But I think that may be the best spot for him moving forward, at the 5 spot, where he's the most impactful. But he can play the 4, he can play the 5. He's a beast, man. I just wish we would see him in more minutes. What do you think are there any drawbacks to playing Isaac defensively, in your opinion? Like, do you think that, is it just his offensive limitations to why he doesn't get a ton of burn here in Orlando?
I think a combination of that and just major concerns about his health and not wanting to strain him in the regular season. Again, we saw him start multiple playoff games. We saw him rack up significantly more playoff minutes. Defensively, there is no issue with Jonathan Isaac. There is nothing that he doesn't do at a high level. It's about offensive consistency, and above all else, it's about health. And it's a joy that he gets to be on this list, man, because he basically hadn't played basketball for 3.5 years before this season, and he got back out there, and he showed us all that he is just an absolute defensive monster. So I have him 8, you have him 6, I have Chet 7. My 6th spot we've already discussed. Draymond Green, I don't have a ton to add. All I'm going to say is he's the smartest defensive player since Kevin Garnett, and I think he is still an elite off-ball defender, especially a tier 1 off-ball defender, the best non-true big in that regards, and still a really high-level on-ball defender. I understand your concerns about him taking a bit of a step back, but there are certain dudes where it's like Tatum, I think he's better at at almost everything defensively except for rebounding. And I'm going to continue to bet on Draymond dominating because that's what he does, man. He's a GOAT level defender.
Yeah, I mean, I would hear an argument still for him to be top 5. I have no issue with that.
Throw another shrimp on the barbie. Get in on all the UFC 305 action live from the land down under at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. The middleweight title's on the line for the main event, but the card is stacked full of rip snorter blokes and Sheilas.
And speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you just bet $5. UFC 305, it's going to be a ripper of a good time. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. At 7... I do have Evan Mobley here. And,
wow.
I think Mobley's great, and I think we really saw his value in the playoffs. I think long-term still, I'm of the belief that he can coexist alongside another 5, but I think the best route for him moving forward is playing that 5 spot. He's an elite pick-and-roll defender. He's an elite isolation defender. He's a really good post defender. And he held opposing players nearly 10% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That's the number 10 mark in all of basketball, minimum 6 defensive field goal attempts per game. A really solid rebounder. And I think we've seen Evan Mobley hold his own in these matchups against really good centers. Like, I trust Mobley one-on-one against other guys with this combination of length. Like you mentioned with Chet and comparing him to Wemby, I think he needs to get a little bit more disciplined. I think he needs to get a little bit better at staying vertical, right? I think he can be a little bit more reckless when going up to contest shots, but he's of the elite rim protectors already in his very young career, and I think he can very much climb up on this list, man. I think Mobley, Chet, and Wemby are all going to be one of the best defenders in basketball one day.
They already are.
Yeah, they're already up there, but I think they're going to be like the best of the best, top 5 complete. Yeah. The other guys that are higher on this list for me, stronger guys who I think are a little bit more impactful on the boards and who have a similar impact inside protecting the rim. So that's why Mobley comes in at number 7 for me.
I am kind of shocked. I think that this is really low for Mobley. I have him a few spots higher, and I'm not kidding. I considered Evan Mobley as my number 1 defender in the NBA because I think he probably has the best combination of switchability and rim protection in the entire league. And I thought he was the best defender in the playoffs that we just saw. Regular season held opposing players 10% below their typical field goal percentage at the rim. Great number. Playoffs, though, that was 15%. And we saw him thrive as the lone rim protector on the floor. He was dominant. He's a 92nd percentile pick and roll defender. He's an elite drop defender, elite help defender, uses that length for recovery blocks, and is pretty disciplined, man. I mean, he's not foul prone. He's very, very smart. Like, I think Chet is exceptionally mature defensively. I think Mobley is much closer to Chet than he is a Wemby, who still has a lot of refining to do, but is just such a physical freak that his impact is absolutely monstrous. Regardless, the thing that sets Mobley apart, the reason that I think you could make a case for him as the best defender in basketball is, again, that he is this elite tier 1 rim protector and is also an awesome wing defender. Like, outside of Bam, he is the most switchable center who we are going to talk about on this list today. Moves his feet like crazy, so agile in space, 80th percentile isolation defender, and nobody else takes on elite wing matchups like Evan Mobley does when we're talking about these bigs, right? We're not talking about switching. We're talking about, hey, Evan, we need you to guard Paolo Banchero. We need you to shut him down, and he does it. Paolo shot 16 of 50 when guarded by Mobley. He wasn't able to overpower him. Mobley, I do think, has improved in terms of strength, improved in terms of physicality. Not a guy who gets abused in the post whatsoever. 73rd percentile post defender. I think his physicality post defense is very underrated. His positioning is also amazing. His length is great. Same things that allow Chet and Wemby to hold their own there. But I think Mobley's the best pure post defender of those three, and easily the best perimeter defender, wing defender. But like, he's forcing Paolo into exceptionally tough jumper after exceptionally tough jumper. Paolo takes those shots, but he took more of them against Mobley than anybody else, and they were even tougher because that length is so impactful. Jayson Tatum shot 9 of 24 when guarded by Evan Mobley, right? He just sticks with these guys every step of the way. He's so efficient, so good as a mover. And then that length is just incredibly difficult to finish or to shoot over. Jaylen Brown shot 8 of 19 when guarded by Evan Mobley. So he is just such a complete defensive freak. And I don't think the defensive on-off numbers can capture his greatness, how truly insane he is defensively, because of Jared Allen. It's what we're talking about with the Celtics, right? They have so many great defensive players. For the Cavs, though, it's like you have two great defensive bigs. So when one is off the floor, the other's on the floor. You're still going to put out a good defense with just Jared Allen on the floor. But they actually had their best defenses this year with Mobley on the floor and Allen off. In those minutes, they had a defensive rating of 111. Together, they had a defensive rating of just under 113. With Allen on the floor alone, they had a defensive rating of 113.5. So it's not a big difference, but all of those are very good numbers. The fact that Evan Mobley can anchor a slightly more elite defense out of those combinations on his own, though, cements his status to me as a top 4 defender in the NBA. He's a very good rebounder, much better than a Chet, not elite at the level of, I guess I'll spoil where I have Evan Mobley, the top 3 defenders in the NBA. I do have him at number 4. If he improves there, that could move him up. And maybe if we had a bit larger sample size of him consistently being the primary post defender, because while I think he's good there, I wouldn't consider him an elite post defender, and just as the lone defensive anchor overall, because he's killed it in his minutes, he killed it in the playoffs, but he has still mostly played with Jared Allen alongside him. But it's just an insane combination, dude. Tier 1 rim protection and elite wing defense, better than any big in basketball other than Bam Adebayo. That's crazy. I mean, that is an absurd combination of like the two things that you want from a defensive big, rebounding being the third, and that's where Mobley is just a tick below the elite of the elite.
So you think Mobley could be the best defender in basketball as soon as next year?
I do. Yeah, I considered him. I mean, I thought he was the best defender in basketball in these playoffs pretty clearly. I thought he was ridiculous in both those series, protecting the rim and defending. Great wings, star wings, Paolo, Tatum, Jaylen Brown. So yeah, I think you could make a case for him right now.
So why don't the Cavs just bite the bullet? If he can carry this absurd defensive load, man, deal Jared Allen, go get you a more complimentary asset, and go win some playoff basketball games.
I think they should. I think that Evan Mobley has absolutely proven that he can do that. And offensively, you can have your questions about him holding things down as the lone big, but it's like, I think you'd be a great defense with Evan Mobley out there and quality wings. I don't think you need to do the too big thing. I don't think you need to play Mobley at the 4 at all. I don't know how you could look at these playoffs where he played his best basketball ever, offensively too, mind you, and say, yeah, we need to recommit to Jared Allen, which they did. Jared Allen is good. He's not as good as Evan Mobley. He certainly doesn't have the upside that Mobley does, and it's just not the best fit. And I think we've seen that beyond a shadow of a doubt now.
So do you have Rudy Gobert in your 5 spot?
No, I have Rudy Gobert higher than that. You want me to give my 5 spot? My 5 spot is Bam Adebayo, and I know that you are super, super high on Logan. Yeah, I know that you love Bam. There's a lot to rave about with Bam. First off, nobody works harder on the defensive end out of these elite bigs. Bam does not have the size or the length of these other tier 1 defensive bigs who we're talking about. He's 6'9" with a 7'1" wingspan. In terms of, again, size and length, that puts him like well below all these other dudes who we're talking about. What he does have, though, is the best feet and the best ability to guard the perimeter of any center ever. I think that Kevin Garnett is a close second, but I think that Bam is the single most switchable defensive big that we have seen. He's a 71st percentile isolation defender. Like Mobley, has that ability to take on forward matchups, which is huge. And he can switch on to guards at a very high level. He's also a really, really good post defender. Super physical there, super high motor, makes it difficult to complete every catch, right? He just doesn't stop working. His effort on the glass is ridiculous. He by far leads the league in defensive box outs and racks up defensive rebounds. Constantly locked in. Doesn't make mistakes, really, and can never be exploited, basically, because of his ability to play so many roles defensively. The reason I have him at 5 is just the lack of really high-end rim protection. Bam was like 80th in shots defended at the rim this past year, and he only held opposing players about 5% below their average percentage there, which for an elite big, like it's easily the lowest number that we'll see on this list. In 2023, players actually shot better than average at the rim against Bam. So this to me is the fallacy that gets spread about Bam when people argue that he's the best defender on the planet. What I will see, especially Heat fans say all the time, Gobert will get toasted off one switch, and everybody will say, oh, well, that would never happen to Bam. That would never happen to Bam. And it's like, yeah, it wouldn't. Bam is the best defender in space of any of the bigs who we're talking about. But then they act like Bam is both an elite perimeter defender for a big and an elite rim protector, so that makes him the best. He's not an elite rim protector. He's not close to the other guys who we're talking about in the top 5 as a rim protector. He is good there, but he's well behind these other guys. That's why I would give the advantage to Mobley. Mobley brings a lot of the switchability, not Bam level, but then is easily surpassing him as a rim protector. And if you're not a great rim protector as a big, it just limits how transformative you can be. That's not to say that Bam isn't an elite defender who's let out elite defenses, who has anchored defenses that have been really the backbone of deep playoff runs. He's done all of those things. He is as good as you can be defensively without being an elite rim protector. There is a reason, though, that he always improves his defenses by like 3 to 6 points per 100 possessions when he's on the floor versus off it. And we've seen Rudy Gobert, we've seen Draymond transform them by 10 to 12 points per 100 possessions. I love Bam. I really do think he's the most switchable big that we've ever seen. But at the most important thing for a center defensively, he's like tier 3 at that. And I do think that matters. I do think it gets overlooked because people love Bam. People hate a Rudy Gobert, right? And low lights are a factor in all of this, but rim deterrence doesn't show up on anybody's highlight reel, right? Rim protection that doesn't result in blocks don't show up on highlight reels. And that's where I think the narratives with these things can skew from reality. Bam's awesome. I feel good about him in my 5 spot, though. The guys above him are either such absurd, like all-time rim protectors that they've earned their spots there. And by the way, nobody in my top 4 can't guard in space, and we'll talk about that when we get to some of these guys. Or they bring a more complete combination of being really good perimeter defenders, not Bam level, but then being much better rim protectors.
Yeah, Gobert's in my 5 spot. I actually have Bam in my 2 spot. I love Bam.
Wow.
I just value that defensive versatility so much. And like you mentioned, I mean, with Bam just comes...
How is Mobley 7 then? I don't understand your Mobley ranking.
Bam comes with such a rock-solid
ignored me.
resume. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a rebounding and strength gap still between those guys. And Mobley's great defending in space. But, I mean, like you said, dude, Bam is the GOAT. Like, I just think that Bam's ability to switch disrupts so many things that the defense can run. Like, he can just so effortlessly switch out of a pick and roll. And we'll see. I don't know. I've seen Bam... Like, that was the strength of the Heat teams that have gotten to the NBA Finals, that has been the backbone. And I've seen Bam shut down some of the league's best offensive players en route to impactful playoff runs. And so just because I've seen it and because I value that defensive versatility so much, and I think Bam is a good rim protector. I agree with you. I don't think he's the elite of the elite along with these other guys. Like Rudy held players 13.4% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet.
That's ridiculous.
That's number 2 in the entire league. The reason that Rudy isn't my number 5 spot is because I don't trust him as much in space. Now, I do agree with you. That is a misconception that I do want to clear up about Rudy Gobert. I think that is one of the most overblown things because we do have a stupid amount of highlights, though, that you can point to with Gobert.
Yeah, but it's like a handful over a career. You know?
Exactly. And those things are going to happen. And then I think that the other narrative with Rudy that gets overblown is when he matches up against Nikola Jokic, or the league's best scorers. Gobert got babied by Jokic. Okay, man. Well, Jokic babies everybody. Gobert is a baby deer. He is a gazelle. He looks gangly. He looks goofy. That's what happens. But I still am not going to overlook the impact that he has on a team defense. And when you look into the advanced stats, he's an 87th percentile isolation defender, man. He's an above-average pick-and-roll defender. He's an elite post defender. So you have to take those things. And he's still an elite rebounder. He's one of the strongest bigs in the league. That all matters. That's why I think Gobert has to be in the top 5. So he's in my 5 spot. And I'll just get my Bam spiel out of the way. The defensive versatility, man. There's nobody that defends better on the perimeter and in space. There's nobody that is more switchable, that is more versatile. He is so disciplined. He forces all these guys into tough shots. He is super strong. He is super agile. I love the way Bam moves his feet defensively, man. It's like art, man. It's masterful. One of the best post defenders in the league. I think the best isolation defender by a big in space. And he's great defending the pick and roll. I just really value his versatility more than everything else and his disruption. I don't think he's at the level of a rim protector, but I'm okay with that, man. I just value his versatility more than anything else. So Bam is my number 2 defender as of right now.
I think that the margins are pretty slim, so I'm not outraged about it. I really do love Bam, but I actually have Gobert at 2, and I'll give my spiel here. I just think that people cannot separate Rudy Gobert's defense from how much they hate watching him offensively, from how much they dislike him as a person. Like, Rudy Gobert sucks as an offensive player, okay? There are Rudy Gobert stans who will try to tell you that he is a really valuable offensive player. There are things he does well, right? He's a great screener. After that, basically everything he does is replacement level, okay? I mean, he can get totally rattled off the catch as a short roller. His finishing, it's like, yes, he's big and long, but if you confront him with a low man anywhere outside the restricted area, he is going to struggle, so he can do efficient, simple finishing. He is a great screener. He's going to have a lot of horrifyingly bad moments offensively that will make you want him off your TV screen. And because of that, people want to slander him in every way possible, so they just falsely act like his defense falls off when it doesn't. And the other thing is, he's been set up for failure because he's now a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, while guys like Anthony Davis, while guys like Bam Adebayo have 0 Defensive Player of the Year awards. That just inflates the animosity because people say, oh, there's this huge discrepancy between them, and there's not. There's never been a huge discrepancy between these guys as defenders whatsoever. And Gobert isn't one of the top 5 defenders we've ever seen. He's not the GOAT defender like his D-point tally would suggest, but he's absolutely dominant. He is an all-time great defensive player, and that all starts with all-time rim protection. You mentioned holding players 13% below average inside of 6 feet. The deterrence is basically unparalleled. You could argue that Wemby at this point is an even greater disincentive for people to attempting shots around the rim, but it's exceptionally close between the two of them, and Gobert is a much more composed, put together, disciplined, smarter interior defender and rim protector at this stage. And he's the most complete he's been as a defender too. That's the thing. We can talk about these bad moments that he has guarding in space. He should know on the last possession that Luka is hunting a step back 3 when he gets that switch, right? He doesn't need to commit that hard to the drive. That's a bad moment. Steph, we all remember, famously crossed him in a brutal, brutal way one time. But you mentioned how highly he ranks as an isolation defender, and we saw it. We saw it in this very playoff run. All of the stars who Minnesota faced, except for Luka and Jokic, which means if we combine KD, Kyrie, Book, Beal, and Jamal Murray, all of those guys combined shot 32 of 85 when guarded by Gobert in the playoffs. 37%. He was blitzing against the Suns very effectively. He was switching very effectively. Kevin Durant could not get a step on him. Devin Booker could not get a step on him. There were multiple possessions where they said, oh, hooray, we've got the switch with Rudy. Let's try to target him. And he stayed with them. He moved his feet really well. They had to pass out of it or they attempted a really bad shot. He was guarding them on an island and he was clamping. He's not a bad mover. He just has bad moments. And he's obviously not like Bam level. But again, he makes up for the difference in switchability with the difference in rim protection, in my opinion. The most important thing that you can do as a big defensively, where he is an all-timer, and he's a top 3 rebounder in basketball, over 13 boards a game in the last 5 years. You mentioned some of the myths, some of the fallacies that get spread about Gobert defensively. Number 1, he doesn't guard Jokic or he can't guard Jokic. This is ridiculous for numerous reasons. Number 1, the Lakers tried the exact same roamer strategy with AD off ball, guarding Aaron Gordon, trying to blow things up as a helper. The only reason that they couldn't stick with it is because Rui Hachimura was laughably bad at guarding Jokic in the post after one half of game one of the 2023 Western Conference Finals, whereas Cat is actually good in that role. So Minnesota is just more successful in pursuing that strategy that the Lakers also wanted to pursue. It just didn't work for them at all. The Heat went to a zone because Bam offered easily the least resistance of the big three defenders who Denver went through in that 2023 title run, right? He's just too small. As hard as he works, Jokic shot 57% when guarded by Bam in that series. He's normally at about 50 to 52% when he matches up with Gobert or AD. There was just too glaring a size gap. Jokic was going over the top of him with these easy touch shots over and over again, so they had to try to go zone. The Lakers also did not have AD as his primary defender for extended stretches of their matchups over the last couple years. And in terms of guarding him one-on-one, Rudy has held Jokic to a lower field goal percentage over the last two postseasons than any of those guys, and he has anchored the defense that has played the Nuggets and Jokic by far more effectively than anybody else. In fact, it's not even close. In the first round last year, that was the best anybody defended them, and obviously they knocked them out this year on the back of a dominant defensive performance. It's just nobody can guard him one-on-one out of the post. You can have a more pronounced impact as a help defender, as a great defensive big. That's where Rudy's at his best. That's where AD's at his best. But Rudy is still a 77th percentile post-up defender. He's very good there. Huge props to Cat for being like the best Jokic post defender on the planet. That doesn't take away from Rudy, in my opinion. That's a very specific skill set, having that sort of strength to guard in the post at that level. And it's not something that any of the other elite bigs excel at more than Rudy, AD, Wemby, Bam, Evan Mobley, any of these guys who we're going to talk about. And Rudy had like the defensive series of a lifetime against Phoenix. The single offense that everybody thought would expose him most because of how much perimeter skill they had, he destroyed them. The whole Minnesota defense did, but he was amazing in that series. And then he had several destructive games against Denver. Let's not forget game one, where the Timberwolves were so focused on Jokic off the roll that they were leaving Jamal Murray out of pick and roll and just funneling him into Rudy. And that broke Jamal Murray's brain, and it broke the entire Nuggets offense. Like, that's the impact that he has as a rim protector. And we haven't seen other dudes replicate that in the playoffs. The only dude who we have in a different way is my number one player. But, like, Rudy's defense has translated exceptionally well to the playoffs. There's just moments. I mean, this past postseason, exceptionally, it translated really well. Luka torching him on one switch doesn't change that because, I mean, that's just amazing shot making from Luka. It's one possession. Damn near nobody can guard Luka on an island on the planet. So I do think that people really can't separate how much they hate Rudy Gobert, how much they hate his offense, from the fact that his defense is not the problem. His defense is never the problem. He has developed a reputation on that side of the ball that to me is unfair and it's inaccurate. If you have him at 5, okay, that's low to me. But if you have him at 3, right, like, I don't think he's the best defender on the planet, even though he just won Defensive Player of the Year, because he doesn't guard in space at the level of my number one, who's also a great rim protector, a great rebounder, the most complete defensive big on the planet. But if you don't have Rudy Gobert in your top 10, if you have some outrageous take about his defense falling off in the playoffs, you're just wrong. I don't think that you're wrong. You're objectively wrong.
I applaud you trying to talk some sense into people about Gobert, but I think people are just too dug into their heels to change their minds, man. I think if you are a Rudy Gobert hater, I think you're always going to be a hater and you're going to say that he's overrated. And if you appreciate what Rudy Gobert does defensively, yeah.
You can hate Rudy Gobert. It just has to be about his offense. It has to be this guy sucks so much offensively that you can't even play him. You want to say that? Hey, man, I understand that. We've seen those moments. If you're talking about his defense, you're missing the point and you're blindly hating.
And there are still people like that say that Gobert is the most overrated player ever, the most overrated defender ever. We're never going to talk sense to those people, man. I think I'm going to, Carson, I think I'm going to piss you off on my 4 spot.
Who the hell do you have at 4, dude? I'm trying to figure that out.
I don't think he's on your list.
Whoa. Who the hell is it?
I have Giannis in my 4 spot.
I thought you were going to have Giannis. I don't agree.
Yeah,
I mean, the case.
I just can't leave him off my list. I think he's arguably one of the best defensive playmakers in basketball. I think he's the best transition defender in basketball. There's nobody that can erase a play in transition more than him. An elite athlete with elite length, elite agility, and he's one of the best rebounders in basketball, along with still being one of the best rim protectors in basketball. He held opposing players 9.4% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That would be number 11, minimum 5 defensive field goal attempts per game. And he's a really good pick-and-roll defender as well. He is prone to getting beat in isolation. I think he's subpar in that regard. I don't think Giannis, guys can beat him off the dribble a little bit, but I also think he's great at recovering, and that's worked. I also think that I don't think Giannis's full defensive impact shows up in the advanced numbers just because I think he's working with subpar defenders around him. I don't really know if there's another high-end defender on this defense. You can give Brook Lopez props for blocking shots. That's from him camping in the lane and getting funnel players there. So I just think that Giannis doesn't have a ton of great defensive personnel around him, and he single-handedly is trying to make this Bucks defense good or mediocre. Yeah, man, I think he's an elite rebounder, an elite rim protector, an elite defensive playmaker, and I just can't leave him off this list. I think he's probably one of the weaker defenders in space there, but it's not like it's a cakewalk, scoring on him in isolation. Yeah, I'm surprised that Giannis isn't on your list, man. Why did you omit him here, and why is he not one of the handful of guys off your list?
I thought this was pretty easily the weakest defensive season of Giannis's career, and a lot of things went wrong with the Bucks defense. He is far from the primary culprit there, right? I mean, their point of attack defense was brutal, but I do think that he's regressed on that end over the last few years. 2020 Giannis was a top 5 defender on the planet. I still thought that he was maybe a little bit overrated at that stage, and I do think that although Brook is now a statue, cannot move at all, and really hasn't been able to move in recent years, he has been crucial as an architect of elite regular season defenses for the Bucks. His ability to just be an elite pure rim protector, I would argue, for several seasons has been more important in the regular season to the Bucks' defensive dominance than Giannis's. But of course, they lose Drew this year. Everything takes a turn for the worse defensively. Brook gets even a little bit older. But I think there are a few areas in which Giannis has regressed. He is not the same absolute freak in terms of his ridiculous quickness in space that he used to be. Giannis was a below-average isolation defender this year, 39th percentile. So one-on-one defense has never, ever been his strength. It's always been about the off-ball defense first, but he used to be a significantly better on-ball defender than he is today. I really don't think he's very good there. He wasn't a particularly good post defender this year. And he is a very good off-ball defender. There's no doubt about it in that rover role, but still not as impactful there as just the elite centers, right? The elite rim protectors who are defending way more shots around the rim, who are deterring people much more frequently than Giannis, who was doing that in more of a secondary capacity. And I just think his effort isn't what it was a few years ago. So he's regressed too much to me to be on this list. Having him above Rudy Gobert, that's crazy, Logan. There is not a group of personnel you could put around Rudy Gobert in the world, and you would be the number 19 defense in basketball. You could put me, you, Spawnhour, and Theo out there, and they would be better than the 19th defense in basketball.
That lineup's got decent size,
We've got size, actually. We've got size and we've got length, but we are four honkies who are nowhere near NBA athleticism, nowhere near NBA coordination. Rudy Gobert is backpacking us to be better than Giannis led the Bucks to be defensively this year. That's crazy to me. Having him above Mobley is crazy. Mobley's an elite rim protector. He is a better wing defender. I think you're overrating Giannis's defense at this stage. And I thought Giannis just had his best offensive season ever. He's improved there. He's taken a step back defensively, a pretty clear step.
That's a fair argument. I still think there's a rebounding and size gap between him and Mobley, like an individual.
But think
matchups.
about Rudy Gobert, Logan. Think about the defenses Rudy Gobert led in Utah to be
number
one, top 3 year after
year.
He's
got Boyan, Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley. No, he's Royce O'Neal. He's the only plus defender.
And that
on
was
that team.
years ago, but Rudy just led another number 1 defense. He hasn't led a defense that wasn't top 10 in years and years.
I think Giannis's regression is a little overblown, and I ironically think he's an underrated defender now. I think that if Giannis was healthy in the last 2 playoff runs, and we got to see Giannis on a bigger stage, I think we would appreciate what he can do in that respect. I think it's a veteran playing regular season basketball and taking his foot off the gas. He also has and I understand that argument too. Maybe you want to say that he has such an immense offensive load that he's responsible for at this point of his career that he just can't physically exert himself. I think if we got to see Giannis playing the most meaningful basketball, that we would see that kind of impact. And we just haven't been able to. And maybe the injuries are going to catch up to him. Maybe he'll lose even more athleticism. But I couldn't leave him off this list, man. I still really value him defensively.
He's very good. I'd say he's a top 20 defender in the NBA. I think top 5 at this stage is crazy. I don't think there's any combination of dudes who we're talking about in this range who would not be able to single-handedly transform a defense more than Giannis did with the Bucks this year. And when we're talking about like the best defensive forwards, the best defensive wings, I think the Jonathan Isaacs, the OGs, they're just more committed constantly in that role. They're better on-ball defenders. 4 is very high for me for Giannis. I feel pretty good about having him not on my list. Number 3, though, with all the difference that we've had in these last few spots, I think we're going to have the same guy. Who's in your 3 spot, Logan?
I have Wemby. Wemby's in my 3 spot.
I have Wemby as well. So why is he number 3 for you?
Wemby's a freak, man. 3.6 blocks per game, led the NBA in blocks per game as a rookie. 1.2 steals per game to go along with that. For those of us who can do simple math, myself not included, that's 4.8 stocks per game, along with 8.4 defensive rebounds per game. It's just unprecedented size and length, unlike we've never seen before. 7'4" and 8-foot wingspan. He helped players nearly 11% below their average field goal percentage inside 6 feet. That is number 8 in all of the NBA, minimum 6 defensive field goal attempts per game. And the Spurs were remarkably 9 points per 100 possessions better, basically, with Wemby on the floor. That's a defensive rating, a difference between being 112.8 and 121.3. Decent in space. I think he needs to work on his defensive discipline, a little prone to biting on fakes, on dribble moves. That's where Wemby really needs to improve, but the impact that he can have just with this remarkable size in transition, even after getting beat on some of these play fakes, recovering on defense, the size impact that he can have just as a straight-up rim protector. The thing that I always come back to with Wemby, and why I hear an argument, I think, for Wemby is the number 2 or number 1 already. I think the things that are holding him back, like I said, that defensive discipline, how he can get bullied a little bit at this size and at this point in his career with his size and strength limitations. But the thing that I always come back to with Wemby and why it's hard to gauge him, I can't imagine how much better the Spurs would be if they had good defensive personnel around him. Like, if they committed to it, and I get it, the Spurs aren't really on a timeline to be competitive anytime, soon, right? They've got a very young roster. They have very young personnel around Wemby. I just think about if they had good defensive personnel. I mean, the Spurs may be one of the best defenses in all of the NBA. I think Wemby's going to be the best defender on planet Earth one day. I don't know if it's next season. I think it's probably in year 3 or year 4, but it's coming. Just with these kind of one-of-one physical tools that Wemby possesses, he's going to get there. But right now, he's still got some areas to improve. The defensive discipline, the size and strength, and the rebounding. But it's crazy. This guy's played 1 year of basketball, and he's already number 3 on this list. That's unheard of.
Yeah, he's the greatest defensive talent that we've ever seen, and he should be the best defensive player ever. We've never seen physical tools like this. 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan and being able to move in space at all. He's a complete freak in every way possible. Already clearly the best defensive playmaker alive. 4.8 stocks per game. We haven't seen that in almost 20 years, and he did it in under 30 minutes per game. You mentioned how great he is as a deterrent and as a rim protector. Not quite at the level of a Gobert as a pure rim protector, in my opinion, even though the block total surpasses him because of some of the discipline, some of the IQ, some of the help instincts, areas in which he's still developing, still needs to refine. But the extent to which he already forces the greats, and really everybody, to adjust their play style is remarkable. Everybody has to be more conscious of Wemby's presence than basically any other player in the league, just in terms of the sheer length and size that you are dealing with at every moment. Nobody can touch that. Nobody has that sort of intimidation factor. I think about how dramatically Jokic had to adjust his play style against Wemby, right? Consistently catching the ball beyond the three-point line and then just sprinting into a floater, trying to get that up before Wemby could get a good contest on it. It's similar to what I was saying with Chet, but just all the more so. You can try to bully Wemby out of the post, but you have to create enough space to get that shot up over him. Jokic, in another one of their matchups, was posting up more, and he had some good wins, but it's like, if he did not completely fool Wemby with a fake, or if he did not bury that man under the rim, like, he was going to get that shot affected. He was very likely going to get blocked. And that's just a special sort of physical trait that nobody else has at that level. His ability to make recovery blocks is already unparalleled. Same thing. That 8-foot wingspan allows him to make plays affecting shooters that nobody else can on closeouts on the perimeter. And he's a monstrous rebound. Averages 13 rebounds per 36 minutes already. You mentioned how much he transformed the Spurs defense with bad personnel. Getting that group to play as a 75th percentile defense with him on the floor is amazing. I will say, because I saw this used a lot as an argument in the deploy conversation this year of him versus Rudy, the idea that Rudy couldn't do that is silly when you look at what he did in Utah with bad perimeter personnel, leading them to be consistently automatically top 3 defenses. The other little issues that Wemby does still have defensively, he's just a 52nd percentile isolation defender, and this to me is very telling about how we discuss defensive players, because when you watch Wemby guard in space, Logan, who does he look more like? Does he look more like Rudy Gobert, or does he look more like an Anthony Davis or an Evan Mobley? I'll let you answer.
Gobert, there's a little more gangly, kind of goofy,
There's a lot more Gobert. There's a lot more Gobert. In fact, I would say Gobert
it's hard.
is better at guarding
that kind of
space
size.
right now.
It's just hard to be super coordinated.
Exactly. He's 7'4" for God's sakes. He can't be perfect guarding in space, especially as a rookie. But nobody mentions that. Like, that's my point. There's just a double standard here.
And I think, again, it's a complete double standard. It's the aesthetics of the game. It's that Wemby can handle and shoot and do all
so
this
much
cool
of it is
stuff.
about offense, and we're talking about defense.
I mean, there's so many of all the clips that I've seen of Gobert getting cooked too. There's a bunch of Wemby literally getting turned around, looking foolish. Like, no, I completely agree.
And his recovery ability is so insane that I still like him in terms of the scope of all bigs in the league guarding in space, right? Just like I like Gobert, but neither of them have that sort of quick change in direction, super efficiency of movement that you get from like these elite bigs guarding in space. In the post also, he's a 54th percentile post defender. His length mostly makes him really hard to score on, but certain dudes can win with their strength, with their craftiness. We've seen it with Jokic. We've seen it with Şengün. He's not bad at anything defensively. Again, he's the best talent we've ever seen there. He's just the least refined of anybody on this list. Biting on fakes, at times being overly ambitious chasing blocks, at times being late as a helper. But he's a rookie. Like, it's ridiculous that we would even hold him to the standard of these other guys. I'm just explaining why I don't think he's the best defender in the league yet. Because his defensive highlight reel, my God, it's not even close. He can do things nobody else can dream of. His steals and block totals, again, lapping everybody else in the league. But those aren't the best measures of who is the best defender possession to possession. And I really did consider Mobley against him, Logan. I am that high on Mobley as a complete defender. I think he's an absolute monster. I just think Wemby's tools are so ridiculous that it's like there's only 2 guys who have those sort of tools but also have the IQ and the refinement to be above him, because just the sheer value of being 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan, it is insane what that does to opposing offenses, and it already makes him a top 3 defender. He's just got ways to improve, and he will. And if he's not unequivocally the best defender in the league, even with the great competition with Chet and Mobley, I'll be disappointed and I'll be surprised.
And he took strides, too. I mean, mid-season when they finally, not even mid-season, before mid-season, actually, like in December when they switched him over to the 5 spot. Yeah, I mean, he made
constantly getting better.
Massive Improvements. But you just finally saw the complete defensive impact that he could have when they finally moved him over. In your 2 spot, you have Gobert. In my 2 spot, I have Bam. I assume we agree in my number 1 spot. I have Anthony Davis.
I'm with you, man.
Davis just is the complete package, man. And I really thought you saw it. If you haven't been convinced over the past couple of years, Team USA, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
we needed him most. Anthony Davis stepped up, dude. It's that veteran, grown man strength that Davis has. It's that ability to anchor the boards. It's the IQ where he just doesn't make a mistake. He is perfect. Positioning, being where he needs to be. But also defending in space and just being a general disruptor. Anthony Davis just consistently just blows shit up that you're trying to do, man.
Yeah.
97th percentile post-up defender. a 76th percentile isolation defender, an above average pick and roll defender. If you harken back to 2 years ago when they took on the Warriors, what he was able to do in the Steph Curry pick and roll and blowing that up. Like, nobody can defend it the way that AD does. And again, it's that combination of IQ, of positioning, and of agility that you get at this spot. 2.3 blocks per game, tied fourth in all of basketball. 9.5 defensive rebounds per game, rebounded his ass off. It's that combination that we've been talking about of elite rim protection, of defensive playmaking, of defending in space, and like I said, man, of just being disruptive. I think he's the best disruptor in all of basketball, man. And when you combine that with the physical tools that he has, the strength, the agility, the size, Anthony Davis is the total package. And I think Wemby's coming for this throne. I don't know when the transition, when the passing of the torch is going to come. I think it is imminent. But for right now, Anthony Davis is the number one defender in all of basketball to me, man. It's that total package. There's no holes. There's no holes that you can poke in Anthony Davis's game, man. He is the perfect defender at the 5 spot to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there are multiple ways you could go with this spot that I would not be upset about. I thought after last year, AD pretty clearly had this title because I thought the 2023 postseason, as I've said many times, was one of the best individual defensive displays that we've ever seen. He averaged 4.5 stocks per game, 14.1 rebounds per game, led the Lakers to be a top 3 defense in both the first 2 rounds without great personnel alongside him. Against the Grizzlies, it was just an all-time display of pure rim protection, eliminated shots around the rim for them. And then you mentioned what he did against the Warriors, playing this incredibly effective drop coverage, this high drop, I should say, where he's using his length and hands to affect pocket passes, where I think he's the best. I think he is the best big in basketball in terms of his hands, his ability to generate steals, and then still challenge Steph as a pull-up shooter. Like, he just destroyed 2 offenses in a row right before our very eyes. I don't think anybody else can do that. I mean, again, Gobert was dominant defensively through the first 2 rounds of this playoffs, but I do think that AD is even more matchup proof. I do think that he's more versatile. He's the most complete defensive big. Bam is the most switchable, but Bam is not an elite rim protector. Mobley is very close because he blends that switchability and that rim protection, arguably just those 2 things at a higher level than AD. But AD's hands are significantly better. His rebounding is significantly better. So that makes him the most complete. He can play every coverage, do everything extremely effectively. This year, still elite rim protection, 3.5 stocks per game, 12.5 rebounds. You mentioned how elite he is as a post defender. That's not even his strength as a defensive player. So it's just the peak that we've seen from him. And the 2023 playoffs, like, that's the best defense that we've seen from anybody in a long time. I don't see any reason to believe that he's fallen off. I didn't think he played his best defense in the first round versus Denver this year, but Jokic is an impossible assignment to take on unless you have a great team defense, right? Unless you have the totality of Minnesota's personnel where you can double hellishly and then you can fly around and disrupt all of his teammates when he passes out of doubles. If you don't have that sort of insane length in the aggregate, if you don't have a cat who can guard him to allow your elite rim protector to roam, and AD didn't have anything close to that. The Lakers' defense this year around him was poor. There wasn't another good defender in the starting lineup. Austin Reeves tried. He's not a good defender. LeBron wasn't engaged enough to be considered a good defender. So that's not to say that AD played his best individually. Just considering those 5 games, considering his skill set, what we've seen from him, I'm not disqualifying him off of that small a sample size in the toughest matchup for any big defensively in basketball. If I need somebody to carry me for a postseason, I'm still choosing AD. And this is where I can already see people saying something about Jokic cooking AD and that being a disqualifier. And Logan will go through the Rolodex of all of these guys. You tell me who Jokic doesn't destroy. He destroyed Bam more than he's destroyed anybody that we've seen in the playoff setting among these elite defensive bigs. Wemby made him adjust. The numbers he put up against Wemby were monstrous. I'll pull them up in a second. Gobert, again, individually, guards him better than these other guys, but like him and AD are on a very similar level there. I'd say they're effectively the same. And then you have AD. So getting destroyed by Jokic cannot possibly be a disqualifier. That's not what makes for a great defensive big. Yes, you need to be able to guard the post well, and AD guards the post very well. It's most important that you are a dominant rim protector, dominant rebounder, and you can guard in space, and you're versatile defensively. And AD checks all those boxes at the highest level of any defender in basketball.
34 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists on 66% true shooting. That's what Jokic did against Wemby.
That's what I'm saying, man. And I was impressed. I was like, wow, Wemby's getting some wins here, but it's just like, it's impossible to figure out. You as one man. You cannot do it as one man.
It's the most impossible task in all of basketball, man. That's such a dumb argument, man.
I concur. And it disqualifies everybody.
Exactly. I guess there's no good defenders.
Caruso never has to guard Jokic. Yeah, it's silly. Any final thoughts, Logan? 80 at number 1, we agree on that. I don't know that a lot of people will. I also think people hate the Lakers. That's part of it. I think people can be frustrated with AD's offense. Again,
I think it's just the Jokic
separate
thing.
The two.
I think it is just the Jokic thing. And also interrelated with that, too. One, not only do the Lakers have the best or don't have good personnel to match up against Denver, I think AD's played him all right. Like, I think AD has played the best he can. And it's like they're trying all these defensive coverages. It's like, I also think the Nuggets have just played awesome basketball against the Lakers. Like, the Lakers have been so damn close against Denver, and the Nuggets have just played their best basketball consistently against LA.
Well, they didn't play their best basketball consistently this year, but they played it when it mattered. But also, the Lakers supporting cast sucked.
Crap their pants. Yeah, man.
Disgusting. I concur. I don't think it's a big gap. I'd hear the Gobert case. I'd hear the Evan Mobley case. Maybe I'm the only one who'd be out there making it.
I'd hear the Wemby case at this point. I would listen to it.
Yeah, I need to see a little bit more maturity from Wemby. And the physical tools are unrivaled, obviously.
I don't think I'd agree, but I'd listen to a Bam case. I would hear you out on that. I mess with Bam heavy.
If you're a switchability fiend, if all you care about is switchability, then okay. But AD is still so good guarding in space and so much better as a rim protector that I think that's a tough case to make. So there you have it, folks. Our top 10 defenders in the NBA. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, the good news is there's plenty more Nerd Sesh content. NBA stuff, you betcha. Check it out on our YouTube channel. We've got all our full shows. We've got video essays from throughout this season. We're going to have some throughout the offseason on historical topics. You can listen to the show across audio platforms, NBA content, NFL content, trivia content, and you can check us out across social, TikTok, Instagram, at NerdSesh, Twitter, at Nerd_Sesh, to see clips from the show, see graphics from the show, and to see our trivia content, of course, and to see some of the original lists and stuff that we make just for TikTok, just for social. You can also check out our merch at thevolume.com, and you can join our Discord. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. Also, if you want to join the Cal Bears dynasty on NCAA 25, if you want to watch me stream, game, build a powerhouse, you can check out our Twitch. That is nerd_sesh. So, with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.